Sometimes in the human body, one small problem can set off this incredible, catastrophic chain reaction. It's like a line of dominoes, where one tap leads to this massive collapse at the very end. Well, today, we're going to follow that exact chain and see how a problem that starts out completely silent can end in a fight for your life. So let's start at the beginning. Imagine a problem that's building up quietly, maybe for years, inside the very highways that carry blood through your body. You don't feel it, you don't see it, but it's there, and it's setting the stage for everything that's about to happen. So how on earth does that quiet problem in your arteries lead to this, a full-blown medical emergency where your lungs are literally filling up with fluid from the inside? I know, it sounds like a massive leap, but it's not. It's a direct path. And in this explainer, we're going to trace every single step of that deadly domino effect. All right, so every story has a beginning, right? Every chain reaction starts with that first domino getting pushed. And in our story, that first domino is the slow, silent clogging of our arteries. This is the root of it all. This is the trigger for the entire cascade we're about to unpack. The fancy medical term for this is atherosclerosis. Now, just think of your arteries as these really smooth, flexible hoses. Atherosclerosis is what happens when gunk, this fatty plaque, starts building up on the inside walls. It makes those nice, flexible hoses all hard and stiff and narrow, and, well, that makes it a whole lot harder for blood to get through. So what causes this plaque to build up? Well, you're probably going to recognize these usual suspects. Smoking, high cholesterol, not moving around enough, diet. These aren't just things your doctor nags you about. Each one of these is like a little nudge on that very first domino, setting this whole dangerous process in motion. And here's what's really terrifying. You might not feel a single symptom until one of your coronary arteries is 70 to 75% blocked. Think about that. That is a massive blockage. This whole process can be completely silent for years, even decades, while the danger just quietly builds up inside you. Okay, so when those arteries get super narrow, we run into a big problem called ischemia. And this is a really crucial idea. Ischemia just means that some part of your body isn't getting enough oxygen because the blood flow is choked off. It's kind of like putting a kink in a garden hose. The water just trickles out. Well, in your body, that water is oxygen-rich blood, and without it, your tissues literally start to starve. Now, that oxygen starvation is bad anywhere, but when it happens in the arteries that are supposed to be feeding the heart muscle itself, well, that's what knocks over the second, much bigger domino, a direct attack on your heart. Now, we need to clear something up here, because this is really important. Sometimes you get a warning shot. That's called angina. It's a temporary chest pain or discomfort because the heart is briefly starved for oxygen. It's a warning. But if that lack of oxygen goes on for too long, it's not a warning anymore, it's the main event, a myocardial infarction, or what we all know as a heart attack. And this is the point of no return. A heart attack isn't just about pain. It's the literal death of heart muscle tissue. It's been starved of oxygen for so long that it dies. And here's the thing, it doesn't grow back. That dead muscle gets replaced by useless scar tissue. This is permanent damage, and it leaves the heart fundamentally weaker. So with the heart muscle now permanently damaged, the body's entire system gets thrown into crisis mode. And this is where the story takes a really fascinating and tragic turn. See, the body's attempt to fix the problem is exactly what makes everything a million times worse. The immediate result of that weakened heart is often something called congestive heart failure, or CHF. Now, this doesn't mean the heart has stopped. It just means it's become too weak to pump blood the way it's supposed to. It just can't keep up with what the body needs, and pretty soon, every other organ starts to feel the strain. So you can imagine the failing heart is basically sending out a system-wide SOS. It's screaming to the rest of the body, hey, I'm not getting enough blood. I can't pump hard enough. And that panic signal triggers all these emergency protocols that are unfortunately designed for a completely different kind of crisis. And this is where the kidneys get the wrong memo. They feel that reduced blood flow and think, oh no, we must be dehydrated or bleeding out. So they kick off this chemical chain reaction. First, they release a hormone called renin. That leads to another chemical, angiotensin. Angiotensin then pokes the adrenal glands to release a third one, aldosterone. And aldosterone's final order to the kidneys is simple. Hold on to all the salt and water you can. We need to crank up the fluid volume in the system. But here's the absolute kicker. As our source material says, this fix is the problem in CHF. The body isn't low on fluid, the pump is just weak. So by adding more and more fluid into the pipes, the kidneys are forcing that already failing heart to work even harder. It's literally like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. So now, this terrible fix has set the stage for the final devastating domino to fall. The whole system is overloaded with fluid it can't handle, and that extra fluid has to go somewhere. The pressure just builds and builds and builds until it finally reaches a breaking point in one of the most delicate places in our body. And that breaking point is the lungs. The condition is called pulmonary edema. The pressure inside the blood vessels gets so high that fluid is literally squeezed out of the blood and into the tiny little air sacs in your lungs. Those are the alveoli. And there you have it. That's the final link in the chain, connecting the kidney's mistake directly to the lungs. And the signs of this are exactly what you'd imagine if your lungs were filling with fluid. We're talking severe shortness of breath. A doctor can actually hear crackles or gurgling sounds with a stethoscope. And in the worst cases, the person might even cough up this thin, pink, frothy fluid. The mystery is solved. From a simple clogged artery all the way to fluid-filled lungs, the chain reaction is complete. Okay, I know that all sounds pretty grim, but understanding this chain reaction is actually incredibly powerful. Because if you know how the dominoes fall, you know exactly where you can step in to stop the whole thing from happening in the first place. So let's just walk through it all one last time. It all starts with atherosclerosis, narrowing the arteries. That leads to ischemia and a heart attack. The damage from the attack causes congestive heart failure. Then the body's flawed response makes the kidneys retain fluid, which just makes the heart failure worse. And the final domino, that fluid overload causes pulmonary edema. When you see it laid out like that, the whole deadly progression makes perfect sense. And this right here is the most important takeaway from this whole thing. This entire complex multi-organ failure doesn't start with some complicated, unavoidable problem. It starts with that one single first domino, the hardening and narrowing of the arteries. And that brings us all the way back to the beginning, back to those familiar risk factors like diet, exercise, and smoking. You know the later dominoes, the heart attack, the kidney response, the fluid in the lungs, those require doctors and emergency interventions. But that first domino, the one that kicks the whole thing off, that's the one we can actually influence. That's where we all have the power to stop this chain before it ever begins.